Good morning, everyone. Josh of Severe Weather. Welcome to my channel. And this video is going to talk about what to expect in the month of August. And it could be a month of extremes here as we wind down meteorological summer here. Let's take a look at the United States and what we're looking at here as far as overall patterns. Now, it's been a very hot summer across parts of the Southwest and the Gulf states. That heat is still going to be around here for August, and in particular, it looks like it's going to build back into the western United States. So California, Oregon, Idaho, Utah are all going to be looking at the potential to see some record highs this month. Meanwhile, temperatures in the plains into the Northeast look to be on the mild side. When I say mild, I mean they'll be a little bit cooler than average. And in between the two, we've got a battleground set up where we could have multiple waves of intense storms, anywhere from the prairies of Canada right down through the northern central plains and into the mid-south. We also could see quite a bit of rainfall across this corridor. I'm mainly concerned about the Missouri and Tennessee and Ohio valleys, but perhaps into the mid-Atlantic states as well. And the door may open later in August to see some tropical mischief, so especially around the Florida area, but perhaps in the Gulf or the southeastern states. And not an exact forecast. I don't think anybody can make a forecast this far out on anything that hasn't formed tropically, but I do think things are going to start picking up again here as we see a shift in the Madden-Julian oscillation, which is going to take the very active weather that's been on the Western Pacific side of things and eventually shift it over gradually into the Atlantic side of things. It's going to take a little bit more time for that to happen. You're probably thinking, where's this active tropical season everybody's predicting? Well, it can happen like that. We have had already 6 storms, or I think 5 storms, and that's already above average through July. And while August is sort of quiet, we have invests to watch, but nothing really developing at this point. We certainly could see things start to ramp up pretty quickly as we get closer to the peak here. So that's what I'm going to be watching for you all here. Here is a look at the monthly climate forecast system. And you can see overall, we're going to have a ridge of high pressure in place over the western United States and a trough over the Great Lakes and east. Overall, this means the heat is mostly going to impact us in the west. It'll still be hot down south, but not as extreme. Florida could still be hot, but in between, where we've got a trough here and a ridge here, we are expecting multiple complexes of storms to track right through the midsection, the Corn Belt, and down into the Tennessee Valley, into the mid-Atlantic region, with severe weather still likely to be a possibility. With this ridge here, this protects Florida from any kind of tropical trouble, but as it breaks down some, as this trough digs down a little bit more, we may see a window to open up for tropical mischief coming up around the base of that ridge. So right now, no immediate threats. And every time I look at things, it looks like something's going to form and then that chance fades. We're just not in a very favorable spot here to see tropical development. The waters are very warm, but the wind shear has been on the high side. And so we've got these two areas that are flirting with potential development, but just not getting there. Let me refresh that. And now you see just a 50% chance that this system's even going to develop. I think if it does, actually, it may not happen until up here in the northern Atlantic. Just very bizarre, but not completely unheard of here for the El Nino pattern. And you can see on the European ensemble, our window for this first system to develop, very, very low. Again, a very low chance that this develops north and east of Bermuda. And then really we're looking at overall pretty quiet weather in the tropics over the next 10 days. We may see a wave coming across here to keep an eye on towards the 10th of August, but I don't know if we're going to scoop up a name here other than maybe this disturbance that's going to go by east of Bermuda in the next couple of days. Here is a look at the pressure anomalies, and you'll notice that surface pressures are predicted to be lower than average across this corridor here of the Southwest Atlantic and over the central Gulf of Mexico. This does not guarantee we have a tropical system, but obviously it's going to be more favorable to see persistent lower pressures than persistent higher pressures, as tropical systems lower the surface pressure in general. So obviously we got to keep an eye on this at this point, but with it being a seasonal forecast, it doesn't give us any exact detail as to what and where and when. It just says that it may become more favorable. Taking a look here at temperature anomalies, you'll see that despite all of the news about how hot the Earth is, we are in the United States really not going to be that hot. We will have some extreme, though, in that it's going to be a cool month over the plains into the Corn Belt here, a seasonal month across the eastern U.S., a warm month across the Gulf states, and a hot month across the West, especially the Pac Northwest down into Arizona. But these will balance each other off or out. And it looks like the United States will again have a pretty average month of August. I think the whole summer for the United States is going to end up being a little bit below average, although in the Gulf states and in the South it will be above average, whereas the northern U.S. will be below average, and the two are going to balance each other out. So while it's going to be a summer of some extremes in the U.S., it is not going to be alarmingly extreme. And that is good news for all of us, I'm sure. Looking at precipitation, you can see very wet weather expected with amounts of 3 to 6 inches above average for an already wet month in August here, especially in Wyoming, the Dakotas, Nebraska into Missouri, but also across parts of Virginia and the Carolinas and eastern Tennessee. We're looking at monsoonal moisture and complexes of storms coming down, so very active weather here as we round out the summer months here. The southern United States will be below average on precipitation, especially Florida and the Southwest. So while we will have monsoonal moisture, we are also going to see a strong region of high pressure that continues to build here, and that's going to lead to below average monsoonal moisture as the month wears on. So we are seeing it now, but I think less and less over the next few weeks. And then you'll notice this big area to watch here in the tropics. This is what the climate forecast system thinks is going to be a more active uptick in the weather across the Bahamas and near Florida and over the central Gulf. The water is very warm. It's holding more water than ever. And that, of course, works in favor of tropical development. So if you're on the Gulf Coast or in Florida or even on the East Coast, you clearly need to be prepared. I've said that for months, but I really don't think we ever should let our guard down, to be honest. But now we're starting to get closer to the meat of the season. And here's a look at the overall tropics, and you can see there will be an uptick in activity in the north central Atlantic. It already has been busy out there. We'll see some development in the central main development region, not so much in the eastern. And then we see in the northeastern Caribbean, the southwestern Atlantic, and the Gulf, what should be a wetter and more active tropical month here in the month of August. So stay tuned on that. I don't see anything in the short term, but longer term, that is what I'm concerned with. Water temperatures remain above average. This is Celsius, and we see overall the Atlantic basin is 2 to 4 degrees above average, except right near the equator here below the main development region. And really no signs of that cooling anytime soon. We're actually heading into kind of the warmer months. Looking at zonal wind flow anomalies, and this will show you kind of where we look at the upper level jet and where winds aloft are going to be lighter. And it looks like the Gulf will see lighter than average wind flow, stronger than average wind shear or wind flow over the Southwest Atlantic, and then lower near the islands. So areas that have a better chance of seeing development would be in here, would be up in here, and then perhaps in the northern and central Gulf of Mexico. Here's a look at the shear anomaly. The reds indicate higher than average wind shear for the month of August. And you can see overall, we're going to see active weather right here across the central part of the country into the mid-Atlantic, stronger wind shear. So severe weather certainly is going to be occurring in multiple waves here across this region right in here. And then you can see near the Gulf states that wind shear is going to be well below average. So if something does form and move into the northern Gulf states, overall, the wind shear is going to be less than what you would expect in August. And that, of course, is not what we want to hear if we're on the Gulf Coast. Same goes here for Cuba, the Bahamas, and South Florida, where we see overall kind of a ridge in place here. You see how these winds overall are from the east over the greater Antilles and then from the west over the Southwest Atlantic. Well, in between the two, we've got where our subtropical ridge is going to be. And that is going to be the place where we have to keep an eye on right underneath it for tropical development. So stay tuned on that. In the shorter term, we do have a lot of wind shear right now in the Gulf and nothing that looks like it's going to organize, and really a pretty quiet tropics for now. We do have a new tropical storm, Dora, here in the Pacific. We have our invest here in the central Atlantic, and then we have our quickly racing invest towards Newfoundland getting absorbed by this upcoming cold front. And you can see here, here's our front. We may see more development here slowly in the Southwest Atlantic, but it's heading out to sea, not a threat to the United States. Beautiful stretch of weather here in the Northeast, cooler than average temperatures, trough swinging through and drier air aloft. So enjoy it while you can. And then a big upper level low, which has actually shifted east and continues to impart wind shear on what I thought would be Emily. And until this upper low gets out of here, this system is not going to have the opportunity to develop. Just too much westerly and southwesterly wind shear. So we may not get a named storm, or after this upper low weakens, we may see it happen on its last legs here in the north central Atlantic. Behind it, you see just a ton of dry air in place here. That's what the dark blacks are here on my water vapor satellite. And so that is going to keep anything from forming across the central Atlantic. and very dry over the islands here. Enjoy the hot, dry weather that you're getting today, because some more moisture is headed in your direction in places like Trinidad and Barbados. And then looking further out, we do see, after this huge area of dry air, we are going to see a couple more waves coming off of Africa that we have to keep an eye on down the road, but nothing that is within 2 weeks of affecting the U.S. Now, the GFS yesterday did show that we're going to try to have a weak tropical system here towards the end of the week and then moving out. Nothing coming off of Africa at this point, but it's got all this action coming off the East Coast and subtropical systems potentially developing. And after about August 10th or even 11th or 12th, now this solution is probably not going to happen, but it's trying to break off a piece and turn it back to the west towards the southeast coast. And this model, the GFS, tries to form a hurricane hitting South Carolina here on the 15th and 16th. But we've all seen the GFS do crazy things in the longer term, so I don't think it's going to happen. The next system, or the next model, does not show that happening, just so you guys know, and the one after that doesn't either. So we had one renegade solution. There is, certainly some moisture moving west. Maybe we have something that tries to sneak towards the Gulf or Florida towards the middle of the month of August, but it's still way up in the air at this point. The GFS, I don't even give it any look if it's beyond 200 or 198 hours. So beyond August 9th, I don't see any threats to the United States at this point. So one model run did show it. I showed you that. I don't want to scare you, of course. Just want to let you know models will continue to off and on show this, the GFS especially. And until every model agrees or we see more of a consistent signal, then we all know that not to fall for that bait. Now, this is Tropical Storm Dora. It is going to be taking a lengthy track over the Eastern Pacific. It'll be a hurricane here on Wednesday. No threat to land. Hawaii is probably going to stay well north of it. But it will be out for a while, so we can definitely call this one Dora the Explorer. It's just going to explore nothing but fish here over the Eastern Pacific. Longer term, well south of Hawaii, probably weakening at this point. Most ensembles take it to Category 1 hurricane strength. And again, that's the ensembles. The operational models, even farther south, not really a threat to Hawaii. There are a few models that do make this a Category 2 or 3 hurricane, but overall, the forecast shows a tropical storm through 36 hours. That would be Wednesday evening, and then a hurricane for about 4 or 5 days, and then gradual weakening beyond that. The biggest problem we have on the map is in the Western Pacific. This is Okinawa. This is Typhoon Khanun. Now winds are up to 140 miles per hour. The system weakened a little bit, had an eye wall intrusion, and now it's starting to fill back in. And it's right now expected to pass south of Okinawa here tonight into tomorrow, but as a very strong typhoon. And typhoon strength wind or hurricane force wind will be impacting the southern portion of the island. And the unfortunate part about this system is that a few days ago, the track continued to take it west towards China. Now we've got a situation where the system is expected to stall, and where it stalls is going to be a very challenging prediction here for the next few days, because a lot of models show it coming right back towards Okinawa and towards this island chain, and perhaps battering these islands for 4, 5, 6 days with at least tropical storm conditions, if not typhoon conditions. Longer term, we may see it eventually come back towards China or even towards Japan, which is up in here. But this is the visible right before dark out in the Western Pacific. This is Okinawa, and the track is going to be just to the south of the island, but putting it in the right front quadrant here where the strongest wind are going to be. So even though the eye is probably going to avoid the southern tip of the island, it is still going to come close enough to produce typhoon conditions. Here you can see the radar out of Okinawa. This is Kadena that I've got circled. That's the air base. This is Naha, the main airport. And here you can see a well-developed violent typhoon, which is tracking west-northwest. And the strongest of the winds are actually up in this part. And as they move to the west-northwest, they will clip the southern part of this island with winds perhaps over 100 miles per hour. And just offshore, we're talking 130 to 140 miles per hour. So a very, very nasty storm. You don't really, even though this area is right there in between the Philippine Sea and the East China Sea, it doesn't necessarily take a lot of direct hits. So this is going to be one of the worst storms in Okinawa history, potentially. And a lot of that's going to be because of the fact that the system, when it gets out into here, is going to slow down and maybe try to loop back, bringing all the rain on the eastern side of it to this island chain for several days, perhaps right into the weekend. So a very nasty setup here coming up. The models, you can kind of see There's a lot of disagreement on the track, just weak steering currents. But here's Okinawa, and it's not like it's leaving anytime soon. It's going to be an unwelcome visitor for at least another 4 or 5 days. The GFS model takes it through Okinawa right here. This is overnight tonight, and then it stalls it to the west, and then tries to bring it back to the east. And maybe not a landfall, but maybe very close here on Saturday afternoon. And just kind of sitting here and then bouncing back to the west. So we see it bounce, bounce, bounce right over the East China Sea here until maybe next Wednesday or Thursday. It tries to come into Shanghai, but I've seen other solutions that take it in other directions as well. The latest GFS says it's going to eventually go back to the west. The models yesterday did not show that quite as much. They showed kind of more of a track up towards Japan. So just a very difficult forecast, but one where a lot of islands here may be impacted very badly. Here's the wind gust forecast. You can see Okinawa is going to see gusts over 85 knots, which is 100 miles per hour here tonight, and maybe as much as 110 miles per hour here early tomorrow. And then the winds let up some, but still tropical storm force winds down in here, 40 to 50 miles per hour this time tomorrow. But unfortunately, the storm stalls and then moves right back in where the strongest winds clip the western portion of the island with extreme storm surge on Friday. And it's just sitting here. I mean, look at this. It's now showing on Sunday, this is 5 days from now, a return of typhoon conditions to the island. So just a very, and it continues into Monday and even into Tuesday. So this model run of the GFS says we're going to have typhoon conditions for about 24 hours and then tropical storm conditions for 3 or 4 days and then typhoon conditions for another 2 to 3 days. Just a very nasty setup. So if you're a person that prays, please pray for these folks here. There's over 1 million people in the path of the storm, and then China could be impacted. Let's look at the U.S. We are going to continue to see nasty heat, the south central states, flood threat over the Front Range, and a major flood threat over portions of central Missouri over the next few days. The month of July was very active. According to WeatherTrack US, we had over 6,600 reports of severe weather, which is the most since 2008. So we are seeing kind of the ramifications of warmer than average temperatures in the upper atmosphere due to volcanic eruption here at the beginning of 2022. Just a lot of severe weather. The East got hammered. We had tornadoes in Illinois and the Great Lakes, Colorado. We had extreme wind over portions of Nebraska and the Corn Belt here. A very rough July, even though not a ton of tornadoes. We definitely had the wind, and you can see in the green we had a lot of hail as well. And I really hope we don't see a July like this again anytime soon. I don't think we will, but very extreme month for sure. August will be busy as well, but we're going to have to keep an eye on the short term for flooding and some severe weather across this region. We do have a slight risk over the northern Dakotas, marginal risk across the center part of the country, marginal over the southeast for today. Tomorrow, right now, just a marginal risk over the Great Lakes, but that still could get bumped up to slight risk. And we'll continue to see heavy rain across this portion of the country. And as we get into the day on Thursday, the east will still have a chance for heavier storms, but the severe weather threat is just marginal over the Front Range. And then Friday, a low chance of severe weather, but Saturday, we do have an increasing chance for severe weather over the Central Plains. So east of Denver, over to Omaha, and maybe Des Moines, Sioux City, Iowa, and Sioux Falls, South Dakota, we could see an organized threat of maybe some major wind, maybe even a few tornadoes. The flood threat is also growing here today over Missouri and back across the high plains. It's even greater for tomorrow over eastern Missouri, including St. Louis and Jefferson City and Columbia, I believe, are in this. Well, Jefferson City certainly is. And the same area is just going to continue to be hit with rounds of storms here right through the weekend. You can see everything tracks over the same areas as you would expect. I mentioned that eruption, and this is the Hunga Tonga eruption back in the middle of January last year. And we are seeing longer term, this has brought more carbon dioxide into the upper atmosphere. And that is the reason you're seeing all of these articles talking about how hot it's been worldwide this year. This is not man-made. This is a naturally occurring geothermal dispersion of carbon dioxide. So all of these, news stories and articles and press conferences about this climate emergency you keep hearing about, this is nothing that we can control. Legislation and all that, I understand why they're trying to do it, but we're not fighting a battle we can control here. So I just urge you all, if you're reading the news and it's scaring you, to exercise caution and understand from a science background that the need for all this hysteria is just completely unfounded, in my opinion. I'm not saying the climate's not changing, but what I am saying is AGW, global warming, because of what humans are doing, is so minor compared to what this can do, and that it's really not something that, in my opinion, should be broadcast as an emergency. Now, if we see eruptions like this over and over again, we could have a bigger problem. But right now, we're just seeing longer term impacts from a volcanic eruption that may still be around for a few more years. So the El Nino very much can be destructive. We understand how that works. However, longer term, this is not the end of times. Now, the end of time certainly could come. And if you are a believer like I am, then obviously that's something that you understand. And if you're not, that's fine. But I really do appreciate your time, and I'm happy to answer questions you have about it. I can understand if you don't believe what I believe. That's fine. I'm open to hearing what you have to say. But please understand, I've been doing this for a while. I'm not a climate expert, but I do understand how the Earth works as a meteorologist. And I just want you all to understand that my goal is not to scare the crap out of everybody. It's to let them understand why people believe what they're believing, and share my take on it as a scientist and as an expert, saying, look, maybe we need to look at the bigger picture and not just the last 50 years of climate data to really see what's going on. So I thank you all so much for your time. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing to my channel. I want to give all the glory to God. He created the earth. He created you and me. And God is with us, whether or not we believe in him. He's given us all a gift. My gift being a forecaster, your gift maybe something completely different, but he has called me to share the good news with you. And Romans 8:31 and 32 says, what shall we then say to these things? If God be for us, who can be against us? He that spared not his own son, but delivered him up for us as well, how shall he not be with him also freely gives us all things? And I've chosen to be a Christian because I did not want to have the enemy continue to bring me down and down and down into a dark place. I wanted to see the light. I wanted to be a light in a dark place. As a believer, I believe I should share that word with everyone else. Eternal life is waiting for those of us who have accepted Jesus as our Savior. We will see him as he comes again. Jesus is coming. Not in the way that the press is talking about with global warming and the climate emergencies, but when the time is right, God will send Jesus again. And my goal is to let you see that and let you know that in the end, all of the struggle we're going through here, all of our sins will be redeemed by the Redeemer himself, Jesus Christ. I would love to pray for you if you are struggling in your faith or dealing with a difficult time in your life. I also would ask if you could to pray for me as I continue to do my very best every morning here to just prepare folks for what can be some nasty weather. We know there's going to be nasty weather. There always has been nasty weather ever since the Great Flood. And my goal is just to just do my best to uplift you and to help save lives and honestly to help save souls. So I really appreciate y'all's time today. I hope you have a wonderful Tuesday and God bless you.